Hello my friends, Jacob's here once again. So incredibly excited to share this video, which a lot of you have been waiting for. I've been talking about this huge Mandela effect discovery, which really is going to be a little bit earth-shaking for a lot of people, especially all of you pastors and all of you teachers of the Bible out there, because it's intrinsically linked with one of the most important stories there is, something that I've been covering on the channel, the birth of Christ itself. Now, the Mandela effect, for you, those of you that don't know, if you've been living under a rock, I know a little something about it. I've been covering it since like 2015, 2016. I have a huge playlist right here. And you know what basically it is? It's basically things that you remember a certain way, they're not the same anymore. Your baloney used to have a first name O-S-C-A-R. Your baloney used to have a last name M-E-Y-E-R, but now it's M-A-Y-E-R, Oscar Mayer. You used to have adult diapers that you remember being called Depends, but now you find out it's called Depend. This is a phenomenon that I was just blown away with. I've done video after video after video over the years. One of the things that was most interesting to me was the changes to the Bible. Now, the Mandela effect, this has been going around for a long time. A lot of people, they tell you the story about how there were some people that believed Nelson Mandela died in prison and et cetera, et cetera. But really, what it boils down to, this phenomenon where, are we in a parallel reality? Have our memories of certain things been changed? Are we just plain dumb that we don't remember things a certain way? Or is there something else going on? Is there some kind of like quantum computer that has taken over? Well, there's a man, one of the founders of a computer company called D-Wave, a quantum computer that I talked about years ago. 2016, I actually did a video, and on X, I just released this video where he was on stage and he was talking to everybody about how the fact we live in, one reality, but there are parallel realities where things are minorly different, like little changes. And by his own admission, these quantum computers that operate outside of what we knew computers to operate at, well, they are exploiting other dimensions. So this was a big shock to me. Something that I've been talking about for a long time. Of course, it's fun. I have videos where you see all of these great changes, and it's just mind-blowing. I heard that song that everybody knows, the 12 Days of Christmas. I hear it sung, and I want you to go along with me. Are you ready? On the first day of Christmas, my true love. What's the rest of it, right? Gave to me, right? A partridge in a pear tree. Well, guess what? Apparently, that's not the way the song goes. Apparently, it's always been my true love sent to me. Going beyond all of the logos and all of the things that you remember a certain way. Mandela effect, these changes or these anomalies that are popping up have become very mainstream. In fact, just recently, May 20th, I believe, Joe Rogan had a very smart author named Rizwan Virk, who was, go figure, talking about the Mandela effect. Probably watched a bunch of my videos, didn't credit him. I think he even wrote like a book on this, but he was on the show and he was talking and he brought up some of the changes that were found in the Bible. Things like you can't put new wine in, old wineskins because the old wineskins will burst. Wineskin would be the flesh of an animal and it would be used to carry, drink. But if it's fermenting and it's fermented, you put it in an old one, it's not gonna carry the contents of it. But now that word wineskin is gone. Right now there are bottles in the Bible, which is strange because back then they didn't have bottles, they had wineskins. But there's a litany of these so-called changes that take place, a lot of them. The most famous of which was the lion and the lamb that lay down together. Everybody has the tattoos. Judge not, lest ye shall be judged. All of these things that you thought you knew, you don't know anymore. They've changed. Things have changed. I'm so sold out to this because when I started covering it back in 2016 to 2017, what ended up happening was I saw something that had changed, meaning that I remembered it differently, change back. So while I was covering the Mandela effect, and I always left the possibility in my mind that, reality isn't changing. I'm not in another dimension. Yeah, AI is not messing with my memories. That maybe I just remembered it wrong. All of that went out the window when I released this video right here called Mandela Effect Smoking Gun, where the line from the Apollo 13 movie, Houston, we have a problem, changed and changed back. Here's a clip of the movie that's coming out in July that I'm in. I would say, well, do you remember the movie Apollo 13? Do you remember the line, Houston, we have a problem? And they would say, oh yeah, I love that movie. I said, okay, well, that's not what he says. And they would immediately say, well, what do you mean? That's not what he says. So now what I would tell people is, well, years ago it was this. You remember Houston, we have a problem, and that's right now. But let's go to some movie misquote places. I would look up articles online, like BuzzFeed, top 20 movie misquotes, 2013, whenever it was. Back then, the number one that BuzzFeed had was Apollo 13. And it said, Houston, we have a problem. Misquote. Actual quote, it would say, Houston, we've had a problem. So that's just strange, because now we have evidence of big name online magazines doing top 20 movie misquotes, and they're number one, they don't get it right? What Rizvan Verk spoke about with Joe Rogan was the fact that he spoke to, a Sufi imam, and that they explained that there are these demons called jinn that have the power to go back and change material things. Historically, they can time travel, but they can't change your memory. So that is the reason why it is so very important to memorize the Quran. Well, the scriptures are something that I am very, very passionate about. I have a website, jacobisrael.com, where I have hundreds and hundreds of essays where I've taken scripture and I've broken them down. One of my favorite essays is an essay called Paul's Thorn. And the whole essay revolves around a certain passage that no longer exists in the Bible. The fact that I understand that perhaps, we are either on some server somewhere where, if you're playing a game and you're in a VR game, right? Well, the programmers can go in and they can change certain aspects of it, but you can't change. The spirit of who you are can't change. That you would remember things a certain way, and now they're completely different. Like all of those logos, like all of those famous movie lines. Forrest Gump, life is like a box of chocolates. Now it's life was like a box of chocolates. If you build it, they will come. Change to if you build it, he will come. All of these minor changes. But when I found out that there was passages in the Bible, I'd be reading the Bible and I'd learn things like the tongue is the rudder of the ship, which is a great lesson about how our tongue, which is not very small, can have powerful effects, lasting effects on our life and those in the world. But it was, as I recall, a rudder. But now that word is helm. It's strange. So much so that I began digging into the scriptures more, and I released a video years ago about all of these changes. So before I give them all to you, just take a look. You may know about the bottles, you may know about the lion and the lamb, but did you know that back in the day in scripture, in the King James, the word couch was there? Couch. Yeah, that's right. When the apostles in the book of Acts what they would do is they'd bring the sick and they laid them out in the streets. And the verse used to go, they would lay them out in the streets on their beds and, and their cots. But now it reads in Acts 5:15, in so much that they brought forth the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and couches, that at the least the shadow of Peter passing by might overshadow them and they may be healed, right? Couches, right? The word couch was never in the King James before. The word couch didn't even exist until, I think it was 1895. It was invented by a man named J. Wellington Couch. But not only did they not have couches back in the day, thousands of years ago, but they didn't even have the word couch in 1611 when the King James was written. That's why in Luke 5:24, which reads, but that you may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins, he may say unto the sick of palsy, I say unto thee, arise, take up your couch and go into your house. Yeah, the sick and palsy, they're laying there in the middle of the street on their couch, and he heals them, and he tells them, pick up your couch, bring it into the house. Yeah, because that makes a lot of sense. It was never couch. It was either bed, it was mat, or it was cot. But the Bible has changed. And did you know that in the, the faith chapter, one of my favorite chapters, in Hebrews 11, when they were talking about how people could do all things with faith. By faith, they did this, and by faith they did that, and they fought armies and sent them flying, and by faith they believed that this would happen, and it happened. And it's a great story for us all to learn that with faith all things are possible. Well, guess what? In Hebrews 11:34, did you know by faith they drove away the aliens? Yeah, that's right. The word aliens is in Scripture now. It doesn't make a lot of sense because it never existed there before, but now it reads, Hebrews 11:34, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness they were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, and turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Preaching the gospel, because the gospel must be preached to the ends of the earth, right? Guess what? That passage, it doesn't exist anymore. The gospel is no longer preached everywhere. It is now published in Mark 13. And the gospel must first be published among all nations. Published. Yeah, they didn't really have publishing houses back in the day, but it's there now. Yeah, and did you know that Jesus, he gave out investing advice? Sure, he told people that, you should put the money in the bank so that it can collect interest. The bank. Here's another one. This is another one that I wrote an essay on, and it's great. Where John is talking about he that comes after me is preferred before me. It's a beautiful allegory about how the second nature of man, the first us. We have no idea how amazing life is going to be, and I know that things are hard for us now in this first idea of who we are. But when we are born again, if you will, it's. We're not even worthy right now in our ignorant state to understand and comprehend the beauty and the majesty of that second nature of man, that born again nature of man, that Christ man, if you will, that's found within us all, that hope of glory, which is Christ in you, which this message John was trying to get across, because he's kind of symbolic of that religious man. He says that he that comes after me is preferred before me. And he said, that the one mightier than I cometh, the latches of whose shoes. That's right, Jesus wore shoes all of a sudden. You see, that passage was always about the sandals and how John was not worthy to unloose his sandals. But now, in the book of Luke 3:16, it says shoes. Jesus had shoes. Now let me get into, before I get into that one change that I was talking about in Paul's Thorn, I want to get into the fact that now you find the word stuff everywhere. Yeah, stuff, right? It's not merchandise, it's not goods, it's stuff now, right? Now you find the word stuff everywhere. Okay, so in Genesis 31:37, listen to this, okay? This is the King James. All this beautiful, flowery Old English mixed with the word stuff. Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here between me and my brethren. Okay, bottom line is, the word stuff didn't exist. Now, I could be wrong on some things about the Mandela effect. Memory is not to be trusted. But the word stuff didn't exist. Just like I know that a foolish person builds his house on sand, not earth. That parable about building a house on the rock, on Christ, on the truth, on wisdom is smart for us all, because we're supposed to build our life on the truth. And if we don't build our life on the truth, we're foolish. It's as if we've built our lives on sand, which when the storms come and the floods come, the house falls apart because there's no great foundation. It's all about the foundation. And the fact that the word sand doesn't exist anymore and that it was replaced with earth is suspect, because it doesn't make any sense. Now let me get to the passage that freaked me out the most, okay? I wrote this essay called Paul's Thorn. It's basically, a lot of people didn't know what Paul's Thorn was. I explain it. It's pretty simple, okay? I can sum it up right now for you. Sower goes out into the field and he sows seed. Some of it falls among good earth, okay? Some of it falls among thorns. And the thorns grow up. The seed is the truth. It's the word of God. Your word, O Lord, is truth. And so basically, someone's telling you the truth, and it's sowed into your heart, and the thorns that are inside, well, they basically grow up and they strangle it. So the disciples say, well, what are the thorns? And Jesus says, they're the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches. That's what the thorn is. It's the cares of the world, the sins of the world, the deceitfulness of riches. And I tied this all together with this one pivotal verse that is found in 2 Corinthians 12:7. And the verse, Paul is talking about how, he said, I was given a thorn in the flesh. And he was telling people, he said, out of the abundance of revelation given to me, God sent a messenger of Satan to buffet me. He was basically saying, so that I don't think that I'm so great, I was given this thorn in the flesh. It was a messenger of Satan. Satan is the father of all lies. A messenger of Satan would be a lie. The lies of the world, the cares of the world. He dealt with the same things that we deal with. We all deal with the cares of the world. That's so that we can learn about grace and how that we must trust that there's a bigger plan, because grace is sufficient for us. But the pivotal verse here was God sent the messenger of Satan. God sent. Now, I actually referenced this in the essay, where I put that passage up, and then I referenced the fact that this last line is the most important. That we know that God sent the messenger of Satan, which means that everything that happens in our life is there for a reason. That God is in control of all things, which is why we shouldn't be stressed out about this stuff. God sent the messenger of Satan. Well, guess what? Doesn't exist that way anymore. Now this is the way it reads. And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above all measure. The lines are repeated. They don't make sense. It doesn't read right. And The very important verse, God sent the messenger of Satan, no longer exists. And I know it was there. This is one of my most popular essays. I've taught on this subject. Take a look. But I'm not the only one, because I was thinking to myself, well, I can't be the only one that came across this passage and wrote about this because it's such a profound revelation. So I looked it up, and guess what? This guy wrote the same thing. Now, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, because if you were reading the essay now, the reader would say, well, hang on a second. It doesn't say God sent the messenger of Satan, so why would you reference that? Because it no longer exists. It did exist. But not just that guy. Look at this guy, too. And of course, that very famous pastor, Charles Stanley. All of these people pointing out the fact that God sent the messenger of Satan and now it doesn't exist. Now look, I don't know it all, right? And as I said before, memory, you can't really trust it completely. But there are things that I do know. Things that are ingrained within me. There are some people that have a very, very big problem with this. They're very concerned about it. And I don't want everybody to get too upset. Just because I personally believe this to be true. Like I experienced, as I said, a flip-flop, which then just says, well, you know what? Life is going to be a lot more interesting for me, because that really just encourages my faith, because that means that really there is a lot more going on in our lives and around the world than perhaps we give ourselves credit. There's a lot more for us to explore and to understand. And if there are other forces, whether extra-dimensional beings, AI, or whether we're being transported from one reality to another, that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. What matters is the fact that something is happening, and we need to get to the bottom of it. So, before the eclipse, I did a bunch of shows, and I just said, because I knew that CERN was firing back up, and CERN is the particle collider where they smash atoms, they create black holes, and open up other dimensions. Yes. To make it long and short of it, that's what it is. And once again, that was another one of my, hey, perhaps it could have something to do with this. So I made a little bit of a joke, and I said, I bet you we find some new Mandela effects after that eclipse. For whatever reason, I just had this strange vibe. Before I did my video on the eclipse, that was April 8th, I did a video on the virgin birth. In it, I broke down a couple of things in the scriptures. And one of them was how there are genealogies that link to Jesus. There's two books in the Gospels. That's the book of Matthew and the book of Luke. And both of them track two different genealogies. And I explained this. I did extensive research on it, and I went into the scriptures and I read the passages and I put the passages up on the screen. For whatever reason, though, I only included Matthew, which was, I'm kicking myself that I didn't include Luke as well. But I made a point of saying that they express Mary's lineage and Joseph's lineage. I do find it interesting that the genealogies that were shared in the scriptures, which is in the book of Matthew, like if you go to the book of Matthew, these are called the Gospels in the New Testament. If you don't know what the Bible is, they're the two books, Old Testament, New Testament. In the New Testament, you have these Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew starts off, here, I'll show you, it has a genealogy. And if you look at the top, it says Matthew 1, 16 and 17. That's towards the end, because he starts off basically with Adam, kind of, I think he starts with Abraham in this one. But Jacob is actually Joseph's father. And Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. So all the generations from Abraham to David, David to being carried away to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the carrying of Babylon unto Christ, 14 generations. So in Matthew, I'm pointing this out because there's another breakdown in Luke. In Matthew, it goes through Joseph. The genealogy of Joseph, which is interesting, because if you were to do a genealogy of, say, me, you probably wouldn't include my stepfather. But now, just out of the blue, just a little while ago, when I was going back and I was just doing some study, Mary's name is no longer mentioned in the genealogy. Now you got to remember something, the story of Joseph and Mary. Joseph, according to the story, was the stepfather. But by Jewish law, if he was married, that would basically be a divine right. So he has a connection to the Davidic line, and Mary had a connection to, of course, Judah and, of course, the Levites. And so there was a very big importance with these two genealogies, because all of these prophetic passages about what the Messiah would come from and who the Messiah would be, this settles it, except for the fact that it's been one of the things that I've used and for years as to why I express that, the whole thing with the virgin birth, and I've expressed it before, but if you're really doing like a genealogy, the true way to do a genealogy would be through, blood relations, according to what I would believe would be the most reasonable and probably the most impressive. Besides the fact, of course, if you're marrying in and you're not blood related, it's a different story. So I always pointed out these two discrepancies. Why one through Joseph, if Joseph was just the legal parent? I get that. But now Joseph's named in both. Mary isn't named anymore. Back then, I even talked to my buddy Lance about this. And we were talking about it, and I was expressing the fact that, because Mary is mentioned in Luke, and of course Joseph's mentioned in Matthew, and we were talking about this, how that this would be like a sticking point for some people to say that there wasn't really a physical, blood relation connection between the two. So it's ironic that now Mary is no longer named there. If you take a look at Matthew, here you see the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, and so on and so forth, down to Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called the Christ. That's in Matthew. Now in Luke, which everybody agrees is the genealogy of Mary, because it's just very clear there's a different genealogy, different people's names here. But for whatever reason, now it reads, and Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, which was this. So once again, Mary's not mentioned anymore. So now you have two different genealogies going through Joseph. Now this blew my mind, because I'm thinking there have to be a lot of you pastors out there, or teachers or whatever. You must remember that Luke had to do with Mary. But do you remember Mary's name being there? Just a couple of weeks before I went back a couple of weeks earlier, it was there. So, I even talked about it on the show, but now it's gone. It just seems very suspect to me. I don't know. You have to tell me. But this to me was very odd. Because I'm telling you, as a young man, when I was studying the scriptures and everything else, if it said the son of Mary, that would make sense. But if it said the son of Joseph, I probably would have never put the two and two together. I probably would have been like, oh yeah, they traced the lineage through Joseph both times. It's not like something, it said Mary, but every Bible now, it doesn't say it anymore. So you got to tell me in the comments section, do you think there's something, there's something to this? What's weird is I did a lot of research, and in a lot of these other passages, it was very clear that other people wrote about these things, other people expressed these, differences. People got tattoos with scriptures that don't even exist. But with this one, when I was talking to Lance about it, he was blown away. But then I reached out to somebody else who obviously checked, didn't go off of their memory, said, oh no, and then explained it away. A lot of people are explaining it away, but it's very clear that it goes through two different genealogies. So My question to you is, I feel like it's a Mandela effect. What do you think? You got to tell me in the comment section. And does it bother you that the scriptures seem to be flippity floppity flu? I don't even know. I was reading even the Gospel of John today, and some things seem different to me. And I know these scriptures. I read them all the time. So it's very strange. So strange that when I first discovered this, what I did was I went to Patreon and I put out a post. And I said to everybody, there's 2 books, there's Matthew and there's Luke. You know, does anybody remember who's mentioned in the genealogies? And I was getting all of your answers. And then I pray, I'm like, Lord, am I losing it? Because I talked to Lance and he was like, yeah, definitely. But the more you start to think about it, you're like, well, was I wrong? You know, am I somehow, you know, you start to almost, you gaslight yourself into believing that this couldn't be a possibility, except for the fact that I witnessed 2 things flip-flop. I witnessed it. So I know it's a thing. I know it's a thing. I don't want to tell you how weird it is that we have a hose on one side of the house and the whole family, we used to get the longest hose because we never had a hose there. And then one day there was a hose. So much so that Dan and I, we were going through pictures. We were trying to see if we could see an old picture of this spout that is now on the side of our house that we don't remember. Nobody remembers. There's things in our lives that just sometimes are different, but could be bad memory, could be another reality. Who knows? But I'll tell you one thing. I prayed and I said, Lord, am I crazy? And then I got this beautiful message from JR. JR, him and his wife, you know, they had a baby. They just had a baby this morning. And what's ironic is here I'm talking about the virgin birth. Here I'm talking about the issues in Matthew and Luke. Here I'm talking about all this stuff. I pray and I'm like, oh, you got to help me out here, Lord. I reach out on Patreon and I'm like, hey, everybody, what do you think? And then JR out of the blue sends me this, which says, this is the baby you can meet. Luke Matthew? I mean, that's interesting, don't you think? And here, the baby was just born and I'm finally taping this show. So I don't know. You got to tell me. I find it all interesting. I think the Mandela effect, it encourages my faith. It doesn't stress me out at all. I don't care what's doing it. I don't know what's doing it. But I do know one thing. Let God be true. Let God be true. Trust your heart. Trust your understanding. Love. Grow in grace. Don't be stressed out about all this weird stuff. It makes life interesting. You want there to be more people, and there is more. So do me a favor, will you? Hit the like bell. Give it a like. Give it a thumbs up. You know, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Check to make sure your notifications are on. I do a show every other day. It's either under the video category or under the live category, but it's there. All you got to do is go look for it. Hook up with me on X. It's Jacob Israel 71 if you want. If you want to get yourself some of the merch, everything's in the description. You can get Teach Me the Truth no matter what the cost. Right? No matter what the cost, I want to know what's going on with the Mandela effect. You can get any of the merch. It's in the description of the video. I am completely funded by all of you. And, whatever revenue from advertising comes through, it's been slim pickings lately. A lot of us are, really probably a little too stressed about what's going on in the YouTube verse, but things are going to get better. They're going to pick up, and thanks to all of you, I can still come here and talk to all of you. Do me a favor, if you want, join me on Patreon so we can do some stuff over there. There's a link of it in the description below, like $1 a day, $5, $10, whatever. Should let me know. They want me to offer annual memberships, so you just do it for a year. Some people are doing this. If that would make it easier, it would be great. All you got to do is go to the description of the video, click more, and then you scroll down, you'll see all of those links, and you can have the best day ever. I love each and every one of you. Enjoy the trailer to my novel, and get a copy of The Calling if you haven't gotten it already. Okay? So far, no words of this that I should read it again. So far, nothing's changed in there that I'm aware of, so get it while it's hot. All right, I love each and every one of you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
September 10th. Mars hangs closer to the Earth than it has in 6,000 years. Like the light that led men from the East to a child in a manger, it could well be a sign of good things to come. Thomas James shall be his name. The world will change because of him. In the small town of Bethel, in a time not unlike our own, a child with a great purpose is born. Years later, alienated by his peers and abused, Thomas suffers a devastating loss. When it appears he has nothing left to live for in the world, this is when his true calling begins. While trying to escape the sinister powers that be, a terrifying vision haunts him. Miraculous events seem to follow the peculiar young man as he struggles to come to terms with what he was born to do. The stage is set. The time is at hand. The truth will rise and a revolution will begin. The startling revelation of who Thomas James is, truly, will change the lives of those around him and set off a chain of events long ago foretold. There is more to this novel than one might think. Inside these pages hides a treasure just waiting to be discovered. So if you've ever wondered if there's more to life, or why it is we suffer, then this story will not only captivate you, it may just open your eyes to a truth that could set you free. Find out what is in us all that makes us heed the calling.
Click it.